Good evening, councillors. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Benson, Edwards and Harbinson.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Members, do you have any interest to declare? No. Agenda item 3 is the minutes. Are the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of June and reconvened on the 3rd of July agreed? Item 4, Head of Internal Audit Annual Report 2023-24. Mr. Barnes, would you please introduce the report providing the Head of Internal Audit's opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's risk management, control and governance processes?
Thank you, Chair. I will. Good evening, members. So this item is my annual report that draws together the work that we've delivered as a team in respect of the financial year that's just finished, and reports to you my conclusion about those things the Chairman just mentioned, the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's risk management, internal control and governance processes. This assists the committee with providing its own view on those arrangements and ensuring that these are appropriately reflected in the Council's annual governance statement that is reported and published as part of the Council's financial statements for the year and that you are considering as the next agenda item this evening. My Head of Internal Audit opinion is shown from paragraph 4.8 of the report, and my opinion concludes that improvements are required in respect of our governance arrangements and our utilisation of risk management to be consistent across the organisation. It reflects that there have been and will continue to be significant challenges faced by the Council, largely as a result of external factors affecting the Borough, arising from the impact of the economic issues that have affected the country, as well as a period of more potential change with the service reviews that are part of the transformation programme that's underway and the resultant impact on the way that the Council works that will arise from that. The issues I've highlighted are already recognised by management and work is being undertaken to address these as is reflected in the Annual Governance Statement Action Plan. From paragraph 4.22 of my report, I provide a supporting commentary for that opinion through a high-level summary of the results of the audit and other work that's been undertaken during the period, reflecting on the arrangements to manage the organisation itself under the heading Managing the Business, including consideration of risk management, the transformation programme, contract management, performance management, procurement, senior management pay and conditions, cybersecurity incident management, business continuity and sickness absence management arrangements. The consideration of service delivery risks has been reported under the corporate priorities. So under environment, we considered the arrangements around the project planning for the Castle Point plan, waste and recycling services and delivery. Under the place priority, we undertook work on the housing, health and safety compliance in the Council's landlord responsibilities and the corporate approach to estate and asset management. Our work on key financial systems that manage the Council's finances and provide the information that then gets reported in the financial statements was this year focused on housing rent collection and arrears management. Our follow-up work was focused on the implementation of the recommendations from the business continuity audit that had previously been undertaken, and our work on grant claims confirmed that the Disabled Facilities Capital Grant and the Homes Upgrade Grant funding had been spent in line with the grant's terms and conditions. From paragraph 4.80 of the report, I reflect on the status of the audit team itself and how we've complied with the professional expectations of us to demonstrate that it is appropriate for the committee to take assurance from the work that the team has done and the Head of Internal Audit opinion that I've provided to you. As I've previously discussed with the committee, we are finding it tough to find suitable staff for the team, and various recruitment exercises have been undertaken during the year and are currently underway. And I'm glad to say we offered a position to a new audit apprentice just this morning, and we're now looking for a new audit manager as well. It will take some time to get these new appointees fully integrated into their roles, but we will work to gel as a team so that we can continue to provide an effective service for the council. In respect of the last financial year, the team completed 70% of the planned audit work, which provides a solid base of evidence from which to form my head of internal audit opinion, and the current status of each piece of work in the audit plan is shown at Appendix 1 to the report. Appendices 2 and 3 provide the committee with the results of the assessment of compliance against the internal audit standards and the action plan for the team that aims to improve those arrangements further. That's all I really wanted to say, Chair, but I'll be happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Breding.
That's it. Sorry. Obviously I am new to this, so I have got a number of questions because it's the first time I've seen the government statement. So if you can bear with me, please. Reading it, there are a number of audit reports that have been undertaken in various departments throughout the council. Where do those audit reports go? Who sees them? Because you refer to that quite a lot in your report.
So the reports go to management in the first instance, and then we bring a summary of the audit findings to the audit committee. So you haven't got any of this particular meeting because we're looking at the annual reporting, but in future meetings, every meeting will bring you a progress report on how we're delivering the audit plan for the year, and as part of that, we'll begin to feedback the results of the completed audit work to the committee.
Thank you very much. Can I carry on? Because obviously I actually have read the report thoroughly, so just really there's a learning exercise for myself as well. So there's still a number of items that are still being worked on and need to be embedded throughout the council, which you've said you've put procedures in place, but they're sort of limited as to the judgment you can give on those so far. With regard to the senior management paying conditions, how long do you think it's going to take to sort of embed those sort of practices within the council?
So the changes that have been made in respect of the audit work that was undertaken there, lots of those have already happened, and the restructure of the organisation has sort of changed the way that senior management is operating and the arrangements between the council and those officers. So lots of those issues have been addressed and swept away already. There's still some work to do in respect of fully updating all the policies and bringing those through to members to approve and make sure that you're happy with the approach that's been taken for kind of employment policies across the council. But so some bits are done and dusted already, other bits are still work in progress.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm also very new to this committee, so I'm finding my feet. And forgive me if this might not be actually relevant, but I've just noticed that in 4.9 of this report, you mentioned that a lot of staff are now working remotely. Now, I understand working remotely, especially if your office is in London and you live a significant distance from central London, Essex or home counties or something. Is it the case that there are staff here that live a significant distance away, which would necessitate this? And does this practice actually cost or save the council money?
So in terms of where people live, I don't have the information to answer that question. But in terms of the costs, then it can be a cost saving to the council if we're able to consolidate the actual office space that we've got. But it can also be, there's some costs involved in terms of providing people with the equipment they need to deliver that work, and for the council have to have the arrangements in place for that to work effectively. It largely came about because of the lockdowns during the pandemic time. And then there are potential wins from that for the council, but also some downsides to that, which management are addressing. And so obviously the council, the office refurbs are happening at the moment so that we get the right people in the right place to deliver the right work that they're undertaking at a particular point in time.
Just one, Andrew. Going back to that working from home, I thought that had all finished. How do we control how people perform at home?
Through you, Chair. As Head of Paid Service, I think I'm probably better placed to answer that question rather than the Head of Internal Audit. So the management of our staff is undertaken by line managers who report to assistant directors. So there is operational visibility of the work that people are doing. Those people who, when we say we work remotely, we work a hybrid balance. So some days are in the office and some days are not. Many of our staff are peripatetic, so they work out and about anyway. They're not necessarily office based. You know, there aren't many bin men working in Kiln Road, for example. Hybrid working gives a work-life balance to staff. It allows us to move to a smaller footprint in terms of the office space that we accommodate, that we have here at Kiln Road, which has allowed us to free up parts of our building to be hired by third parties. So that brings in income to the council and helps subsidise the cost. The equipment and everything that they work with is linked to our network, so we can see when people are logged in and what they're accessing. Staff have one-to-ones with their line managers on a 4 to 6 week basis. So these are not just pastoral check-ins, they are about work, etc. And of course, teams continue to have team meetings, hybrid meetings, in-person meetings, combination of the two, to make sure that there's sufficient management oversight. And of course, internal audit tests all of that when they look at service delivery and performance.
Thank you. As this provides the Council with an independent source of evidence on the design of its risk management, control and governance framework, but also on how well it's operated throughout the year. Members, is the Head of Internal Audit's report for 2023-24 noted? And is it also noted that the assurance provided is used to support the approval of the annual governance statement? Thank you. Agenda item 5, Annual Governance Statement 2023-24. Mr. Brooke, will you please introduce your report?
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So this evening I'm going to be presenting the Annual Governance Statement for 23-24. So this is looking back over the previous financial year. As set out in the Governance Report, the Council is required to report on the controls that it has in place and also the effectiveness of these controls, to ensure that the Council conducts its business in accordance with law, that public money is safeguarded and it's used economically, efficiently and effectively. And the Annual Governance Statement is the report that does this. The Council itself has delegated responsibility for this to the Audit Committee, which is why it comes to this committee this evening, the Audit and Governance Committee, my apologies. And the Annual Governance Statement is published with the Council's financial statement. So it's a lengthy report, but just to impress on you that it's an important one. Just to give you a little bit of context, and this context is covered in paragraphs 5.2 through to 5.5 of the covering report. Just sets out a little bit of context to the Annual Governance Statement, or the AGS, for 23-24, which I think I'd just like to draw to your attention. So it's been produced against a backdrop of restructure at Tiers 2 and Tiers 3 of the organisation, so that's at Director and Assistant Director levels. And what that's done is that's put in place a resource that we didn't have previously, which is both helping to identify any issues and deficiencies in our business processes, and I'll talk about those in a bit more detail in a moment, as well as providing the means to plan how we address these. So, in essence, what's happened as a result of that, and as more rocks have been overturned and looked at, some more issues have come to light. Nothing significant, but issues that we do need to address in our governance. Which has meant that a downgrading of some assessments from the 2022-23 Annual Governance Statement to the one that I'm reporting on this evening, which is for 23-24. So I'll come on to that in a moment, and it's principally going to be focused around the table that you've got in the actual Annual Governance Statement itself, with some assessments in there. However, I think it's just important to say this shouldn't be seen as a bad thing, because what the Annual Governance Statement is about is assuring that we've got a good understanding of what the controls are that are in place and the effectiveness of those controls, And in essence, it's about the council raising the bar on its governance. And I think in light of the internal audit report into senior pay and conditions and the discussion that you'd have had about that at the meeting, I think on the 3rd of July, I think it's just important that we continue to sort of keep that bar really high on governance. I would also want to say, though, because we're already in July of 24, July 2024, so already within the 24-25 financial year, I just want to report that there has been good progress already made to address some of those deficiencies that are included in the annual governance statement. And just to trail that we'll be bringing more details of progress that is being made to this committee in the autumn time in what's called a governance monitoring report. So just to provide a little bit of context, particularly for those who are looking at this for the first time and thinking, well, what's going on here? Because these scores look like they're going in the wrong direction. Again, just to talk you through the structure of the annual governance statement. So this is not the covering report, this is the actual statement itself now. So sections 1 and 2 of the statement basically explain what it is and why we produce, on which I've covered in my introduction here. Section 3 sets out the key business processes that we look at. And section 3.8 sets out the assessments that we have arrived at. And when I say we, this is the good governance group. So it's made up of myself and another assistant director colleagues, as well as the head of internal audit. And we use a range of pieces of evidence that we refer to in order to come to an assessment against each of these business processes. I'll come back to the assessments shortly. Section 4 within the annual governance statement sets out the details for each of these key business processes. So as you've had a chance to read through the papers in advance, you'll see some details and some reasoning behind why we've arrived at the scores that we have. It also includes the internal audit's opinion for 23-24, which my colleague Mr Barnes would have covered in his report already, a short section about external audit, and then also details of any external inspections that took place over the financial year. Then towards the end of the annual governance statement, there are a number of action plans. Paragraph 4.67 sets out progress made against governance issues raised in last year's statement. I think the numbering then goes out of sequence, my apologies there. Paragraph 4.66, which follows, is an action plan which relates to the internal audit into senior pay and conditions and the subsequent actions that were taken by the council. So as you know, this was published in an addendum to the 2020-21 annual governance statement, which came to the committee on the 3rd of July, but is also reproduced in this 23-24 annual governance statement because there's clearly links across to this, but also because many of the actions that were taken place and reported in that table actually took place in 23-24. So it's just being absolutely transparent and showing that link and that consistency across from one financial year to the next. And then finally, paragraph 4.68 at the end of the annual governance statement sets out the actions that are planned to address the issues addressed in the annual governance statement. So that's the structure of it, really, just to sort of talk you through as new members in terms of the structure of the actual report itself. So if we just focus a little bit on paragraph 3.8 of the actual annual governance statement itself, this is the table which has got some colours in it in terms of the assessments that we've arrived at. And I'm just going to talk through each of those, and then I'm going to summarise, if you like, the action plans in terms of some of the things that we need to do to address some of those, obviously particularly where the scores are coming through as partial. So on consultation and engagement, there's been a lot of work that's been done on consultation engagement, in particular relating to the Castle Point plan, the new Castle Point plan, which is a really good thing. The reason for the partial assessment here is that we have inconsistency across different service areas. So some service areas do a lot of consultation. I've mentioned the sort of planning policy side. The leisure services do a lot of consultation. They get lots of feedback from their members. The housing service also do from tenants in terms of repairs and maintenance. But we don't have that consistent approach to consultation and engagement across the council. So that's why we've come at a partial assessment there. The second key business process relates to business planning and strategy, including partnerships. So that was partial last year, it remains partial this year. This is to do with the consistency of the service plans or the business plans that each service area produces. So in 23-24, we did get a set of the plans, but they took quite a long time to get. There was inconsistency again in the quality of those plans, so that's something we just need to keep on top of and address in the current financial year. Financial planning, reporting and budgetary control, including value for money, that was assessed as high last year. It's been assessed as satisfactory this year. And I think the main reason behind that was that the Section 151 officer just wanted to flag around some changes that he's already made now to our financial reporting arrangements, which just improve those budget reports that the assistant directors and the managers are getting. And he just felt that actually where we probably ended up at the end of 23-24 wasn't quite enough, in his opinion, for him to be confident sitting behind the assessment of high. That's not to say that we don't manage our finances well, because I think we do as an organisation, but there was just something there that just was holding him back from replicating that high in the previous year. Asset management, principally, so partial, again, the last year partial for, 22-23 partial, 23-24 also partial. A lot of this is related more to the strategic approach to asset management. And we've already spoken this evening around some plans to lease out certain parts of the council's building. It's very much the council looking at a more holistic approach to their sort of assets that they own in the round, and actually making better use of those so that they can drive value for money for the council. So that's principally the reason behind that assessment. Risk management, again, more around the consistency. We have a good corporate risk register in place now, I think, and that will be coming to the next audit committee, so you'll get to see that. It's more around the consistency of risk management practices that are taking place on a service-by-service basis. So in other words, some are doing better than others, and we want to raise the bar and get everyone to that same sort of minimum, but sort of high standard. Health and safety has moved from partial to satisfactory. We have had some changes in terms of the way that we do our health and safety, the way that we monitor our health and safety training, and that was the reason for the partial in 22-23. We've got on top of those, managers have been driving through with their teams to make sure that where they have got e-learning to do, typically those sorts of things, that they are doing those. I hasten to add on the health and safety side of things, that in areas where you've got sort of high health and safety risks, for example, refuse and recycling and the leisure centre and things like that, they have training above and beyond what you would expect maybe an office member of staff to do. Business continuity, partial 22-23, this is the only one that we've assessed as minimal for 23-24. And a lot of that really is just around the recognition that there's a lot that we need to get in place in terms of our business continuity. So that's business continuity plans on a service-by-service basis. It's having structures the way that we manage emergency planning. So if there were a disaster that happened in the borough, actually how would we manage those? What are the structures in place? Again, already in 24-25, some processes have been put in place to address those. But at the point looking back to 23-24, I think we were being realistic in our recognition that there was a lot more that needed to be done in that area. And the council has appointed an emergency planning and business continuity lead who will be driving a lot of that change over this current financial year. In terms of performance management, again, it's probably a little bit about consistency here, but principally in terms of performance management for this year, a lot of it is just around that we manage our data. We have a standalone access database which we use at the moment without going into all the details, but it doesn't really link to anything. It's quite clunky. It doesn't really work particularly as well as it should do. And when I come onto the actions for 24-25, you'll see there's a piece of work to get all of our data into a standalone, into a system that we have, which is much more integrated and will allow the assistant directors and the directors to have a much more transparent view of performance across all the different service areas. So that's really the reason for the assessment there. Workforce management, data quality, both coming through as satisfactory, so I won't say anything more on those for now. Information governance, the reason for the partial is just relating to a specific formalisation of a role called a SIRO, which is Senior Information Responsible Officer. It's one of our sort of roles that we have within information governance. The other is Data Protection Officer. So I'm currently fulfilling the SIRO role, but we just needed to formalise that. And then when we got to 23-24, that wasn't sort of basically quite formalised in place. It was falling between a couple of officers. So that's really the only reason on that one. Procurement, we've identified some improvements we need to make to our contract register, the way that we manage our procurements. So we have a procurement manager now who's working for the council and working alongside some arrangements we have with Braintree Council through the Essex Procurement Hub. So again, there's already things in place to address that partial assessment. Project management relates again to the consistency point. It's quite a sort of a common theme really here, that we've got some areas that manage projects quite well, other areas where they're not using the documentation and the processes that we have in place. So again, it's about making sure that there is that consistency across the organisation. From complaints point of view, satisfactory in 22-23, satisfactory in 23-24. And then finally on the ethical governance, including anti-fraud and corruption and whistleblowing, it was a partial last year, 22-23, because of not least because of the whole reasons that we covered in the the internal audit of senior pay and conditions, but actually felt for 23-24, because a lot of those were starting to sort of work through the system, that actually a lot of the other processes that we have in place, the policies we have in place, we have codes of conduct for both members of staff, we have a whistleblowing policy, we have evidence that whistleblowing policy is effective. The view was that actually that particular area was satisfactory. So that's the assessments basically, but I'm giving you a bit more information than probably I ordinarily would do, because I think it's important that you sort of hear the reasons behind those. All of those would be documented in the actual statement itself. And then the last thing, if I'd just like to cover, is just relating to the actions to address those issues. I think I've alluded probably to some of the actions that are already taking place. This is paragraph 4.68, the action plan at the end. I don't think I'm going to go through each of those basically, because you've got the action plan in front of you, and as I say, I've covered a lot of them in just talking about the assessments themselves. But I think I'll probably leave it there. But if you do have any questions about any of the report itself, any of the action plans, anything that I've said this evening, I'm happy to take any questions. And then I'll pass back to the chair, who will move the recommendation. Thank you very much.
Members, do you have any questions? I see Councillor Brillig first.
Thank you. A number of the issues you've raised are down to consistent approach. What's happening to address that to ensure consistency throughout?
Thank you for the question. So a lot of that will relate actually to the restructure that I mentioned in the context, that we now have assistant directors who are clear in terms of what the standards are that are expected across the council, and therefore it will be up to the assistant directors to make sure that, let's take the case of a service plan, that those assistant directors are writing service plans either for their entire services that are under their sort of remit, or they're supporting and also driving their own managers to write those service plans as well. So it's very much about that new approach. I think, it's probably fair to say that maybe what happened previously, there were some service areas that were just better at that, keeping on top of that. Others that were just weren't sort of delivering to such a sort of standard. So it's something that's coordinated centrally. It's something that one of my teams, the sort of strategy and performance function of the council, coordinates centrally. But as I say, having those assistant directors in place and being clear that they are accountable for making sure that there are business plans, for example, risk registers in place, they're monitoring performance, and all those governance things that we talk about in the report, they are then clearly accountable for those, and therefore that's the method through which we'll make sure that it does happen for 24-25. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. On 3.8 in the table, clearly the standout one there is business continuity, and you did briefly explain it, but could you, in layman's terms, elaborate a bit more for us exactly what you mean by business continuity and what that encompasses, so that I understand what's being addressed?
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the business continuity, what we're talking about is that how would the council continue to function if something happened, and that might be, for example, let's say, I don't know, something happens to the road network or the train network, which means that people can't get into work. So how would actually we continue to sort of provide those services? It may be something to do with, for example, a cyber attack on our systems. So what would happen if the council systems went down or our website went down? How would we continue to provide services? And each of the council's areas will have a business continuity plan in place, which they're required to update and keep up to date. Again, it gets back to that consistency point. Some service areas have absolutely done that. Other service areas have fallen behind, basically. So we've been lucky that, we haven't had one of those incidents. And I think if you look back to COVID, I think the way the council coped actually was remarkably good. But it's really important to keep these business continuity plans up to date. So it's basically, how will the council continue to function if there is something that gets in the way of it delivering its services in the normal way? How will we prioritise and those sorts of things? So which services will we actually say, look, you know what, it's not ideal, but we could do without those for a week, but which services do we need to get back up and running within sort of 24 hours or a number of hours from an IT attack or something along those lines? Thank you.
Now that the three-tier organisational redesign is concluded, with governance process leads in place, twice-yearly monitoring of the governance arrangements will resume with reports in autumn 24 and spring 25. The annual governance statement before us includes a reference to the addendum of the annual governance statement for 2021. which sets out an action plan to address the governance issues that have been identified. The same action plan is included in the 23-24 annual governance statement and will be reviewed by the committee every 6 months. Members, I will now move the recommendation set out in paragraph 3.1 of the report as follows. To approve the annual governance statement 23-24 and subject to any further amendments from external audit, approve its inclusion in the financial statements for 23-24. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Brilling, thank you. Members, can I have a show of hands? Is that agreed? Unanimous, thank you very much. Members, there is no other business, so this meeting is concluded at 7:30. Thank you both all for your attendance.